The world is full of interesting people with wisdom and extraordinary experiences to learn from. Join me on a journey to discover them, speak with them, and learn from them. I'm Adrian Sinclair, host of A Podcast with Interesting People at apodcast.com.
Welcome to A Podcast. I am your guest host, Mike Blasi, and we have a special treat for you today. He is a lifelong learner. He has a brand new podcast, and most importantly, he inspired me on my weight loss journey. It's your usual host, Adrian Sinclair. Welcome, Adrian.
It's great to be on my own show.
This is going to be awesome.
I'm so excited, Mike. This is so great. We talked about having you on the show. We talked about the podcast and our many conversations that we had on various topics that we are excited about. So I am stoked today to have you talk to me and talk about how I got to this point. And we're going to be, in the future podcast, we're going to be talking about your journey as well. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, and for today, I really want to focus on you and what inspired you to create this podcast and also on your health journey. So let's take us back where you started on your health journey. When did that begin?
So I started throughout my life, I always try to like stay in shape, have enough energy, and it's always like a lot of different fad diets. You try this, it's the grapefruit diet, it's this diet, it's that diet, and I found that those were like true to their name, which was a diet. You do something for a little bit, and then you just kind of go back to your regular eating the way you do, right? So, so I got at some point in my career, I started eating like once a day. It was just the pace of work. I had no time to do the breakfast and like, your 3 square meals.
So you weren't even trying. It just kind of happened because you were so busy.
Yeah. I didn't even know. Someone just told me at some point, like, oh, so you're doing intermittent fasting. I'm like, what's that? I was just like, I don't know. And then I researched it and I was like, oh, this is our thing. And I started, and I found Jason Fung and his, his podcast and his on many shows that he was on. And he was talking about how, eating once a day was a good thing for you. And I love how he described it. He's like, hey, our ancestors, they ate whenever they could, right? When they were hunting and gathering, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to get 3 square meals. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Sure.
No, it was just like we ate when we could.
There weren't McDonald's on every corner.
That's right. Yeah. And so it made sense to me because it wasn't like I wasn't really into, and I tried it. I tried like a lot of different things. And it was like, oh, try eating every 2 hours, to keep your blood sugar levels steady. Those were the sort of like the rationale behind like eating every 2 hours. Eat like a gazelle. You just graze, right? And I'm like, I'm not a gazelle, like I can't.
Do I look like a gazelle?
Yeah, do I look like a gazelle? And so this one meal a day really worked for me because then when I sat down and I ate what I wanted. This was before. When I discovered through you the carnivore diet, right, and just kind of being on meat a lot, and I've been doing it for some time, and it really worked for me. I'm going to be trying. I'm the type of person that tries different things, so I'm going to be trying. I tried that. I'm going to try to be a vegan for a month. I'm going to try to be a vegetarian for a month and see how my body reacts. And I think that's one of those things that. People should do. They should kind of like experiment, because you are your own best sort of like doctor in a sense of like, how you feel. Your body tells you. And so I really think that everybody should just kind of figure things out what works best for them, like what foods.
Yeah,
right?
I totally agree with that. There's all these studies everywhere. We've got the internet and you can find studies supporting either view, right? Vegetarian, carnivore, 1 meal a day, eating every 2 hours.
Yeah.
But like you said, it comes down to experimenting and finding what's best for you. And I think that's kind of the engineers in us, right? That we take this baseline and then we put it to the test. We make it practical and see, does this work? Yeah, it does. Is it repeatable? Yes, it is.
Right. And so sort of a little bit of a scientific method, and we'll talk about that as well. So I'm going to put a finger on that, as Dr. Tim said. Like when I was talking to Dr. Tim, he goes like, I'm just going to put my finger on it. So I remember.
So you remember
yes, I remember. Like we'll be talking about that.
A little whiteboard here.
Yeah, a little whiteboard. So yeah, experimenting with different things that how we eat and how our bodies behave. I think I really believe in that. Sort of pseudo scientific method because
Sure.
sometimes you need to have a longer period. So although now I'm back on my carnivore diet, although I'm cheating a little bit because
Mostly
I'm eating all the
animal-based.
carbs that are still
Yeah.
left over from the holidays.
I'm not perfect either.
Yeah, but I like it because it's what do they call it? The
Elimination
diet. Yeah, thank you. So
That's how I started on
yeah.
it too. I was like, I want to find out what foods are really affect me, and you can start with animal-based products and go from there and start adding some plant-based stuff back in.
Right, because really all you get is just you get protein and fat, and then all the vitamins and minerals that are in the meat.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can kind of add on like broccoli. Let's see how my body reacts to
Right.
broccoli or cauliflower or whatever else you want to add on. And I'm the kind of guy that and we're going to get into that as well. Like why did I start the podcast and having different guests on the show and everything. But I'm the kind of guy that I'm just going to get bored with monotonous things. So that's why I'm not sure if I could do like carnivore diet for like ever and ever. I always need to have something else. So like I do crave some other things, and not only like the sweets, but I crave I don't know, I want an egg. I want scrambled eggs.
Sure.
I want to put some cheese on it, and things like that. So, but I definitely do feel better, and speaking about scientific method, before doing that, I did a 2-week water fast before starting on the carnivore diet, and I did blood work before and after, and then I did blood work before and after being on a meat-only diet for a month and a half, and my results were really good. Everything was in line, and in fact, I mean, your mileage may vary, and I know your cholesterol levels were different, but and we can talk about that as well.
They definitely shot up when I started doing more animal based.
Yeah, and mine actually went down. So my doctor was like, "Hey,
What'd you do?
You should be doing. You should do what you're doing right now. It's great, And I'm like, well, I'm eating like red meat with a lot of fat and lots of it. So like I'm at a point I was eating like 2 pounds of meat every day.
Yeah, according to the news, I'm gonna die in like a week.
Oh yeah, and like my triglycerides, everything was felt great. Mood super solid. You don't have these spikes of like high energy, like no sugar rush because you don't eat sugar. So very very solid and stable and just feeling just good all around.
Yeah, and that I started with the carnivore, mostly animal based stuff for a few days, and I thought I'd maybe do it like a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month, but like you said, I was just feeling so good. And for me, it was my digestion. Like it really improved, and it was like the most perfect that I've ever had my whole life.
Right.
And that was a real sign to me that, wow, maybe this is what I should be eating.
Right. And so on that note, my digestion was great. It was the, going out the system part, like I had a period where it was a terrible going to the bathroom. It was like I had really constipation,
those
business.
first couple weeks can be like that. That's,
yeah. And then, but thanks to the article that you sent me, and which was really interesting about like how your bowel movement and everything, how things are just kind of. It's kind of like muscle.
Readjusting.
Yeah, they need to readjust. They need to get up to the game, right? Like
they're not used to.
They're not used to.
Yeah, the best way I heard about it is you look at an animal, when it's pooping.
Yeah.
And it's like really kind of getting into it sometimes, and it's like, wow, it's working on that. And when we're eating all this fiber, we don't have to do that as much. But when you take out some of
Lazy
that
gut.
stuff, then your muscles actually have to work a little bit.
So it is kind of like a muscle, like building all the other muscles. And so, we do kind of, I guess, that article was saying that, your gut is just so used to so much fiber. So like you sneeze and sneeze just pooped.
Yeah.
Here we are talking about poop.
Yep. No more explosive poops for me. That's why I'm still on the carnivore diet.
Yeah. But once I got, over that in a sense that I guess not over that. I guess once my system got up to the level that it should be operating in terms of bowel movement.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It's like I almost was jealous a little bit because I know we talked about that and he's like, oh no, my poop is great, man.
Yeah.
I'm pooping like
diamonds.
I'm pooping like I'm pooping, yeah. And I'm like, oh, man, I'm like. I hope I'm not going to have like appendix burst on me or something, So it was like it was a phase, but like once I got over that, it was just super awesome and solid.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I found that some leafy greens like spinach and stuff really disrupted my digestion.
Hmm.
So, I haven't really been going back on those leafy greens. So,
Yeah.
so how long have you been on the one meal a day plan?
So it is going to be four. This is going to be 4 years now. Yeah,
Wow,
yeah, four
that's
years.
awesome.
Yeah, and I tell you this much, if I do eat breakfast, and I have had a couple instances in which I ate like a really hearty breakfast, I just don't feel right the rest of the
Hmm.
day. I just feel like sapped of energy. I feel that my body's just working extra to kind of spin up because it's not expecting that meal in the morning.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that I want to tell others based on my experience is that once you get used to eating once a day, your body is basically used to that and it doesn't expect you. So you don't feel like I don't feel hungry. I wake up. I don't feel hungry at all. I don't need to even. I even had like a phase where I was drinking a lot of like carbonated water, like seltzer water, just to kind of fill my belly with something because I felt like I
In the
needed to eat
morning,
something
you'd
in the
have it for
morning.
kind of
Right.
breakfast.
But now, like nothing. I just drink water and
Hmm.
tea, lots of herbal teas. I love
Yeah.
tea. But other than that, my body is like it's the opposite now. Like if I eat breakfast, like we had holidays and we had family over, and they're like, all right, let's do morning breakfast
Have
and
this huge,
pancakes,
dozen
stack of
eggs and
pancakes and dozen and all of that, and so I'm like just to be in a social gathering and all that. I'm like okay, I'll have that, and then oh man, like within an hour, like within less than an hour, I was just like oh, I'm
Just need a
dozing off.
nap
Need a nap,
almost.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, in the same way, I've kind of transitioned to the one meal a day as well, and I found the same thing. And some of the research I've done, a lot of people talk about, there's no reason for us to eat right when we wake up.
Hmm.
There's like no reason.
Right.
So really, that those first 2 to 4 hours when you wake up, there's your body's just getting used to it. There
Hmm.
are chemicals that are ramping up and things, and it's actually usually detrimental to eat right away. And I know the cereal companies will hate me for saying this, but
Yeah, no, but that's what's been happening for years, decades and decades. We've been taught that hey, breakfast is the most important meal of the day, right? And really, even the word breakfast is like break fast. When are you breaking fast is when your meal is. So like literally you could have breakfast at dinner because that's when you're
hmm
breaking your
right,
fast.
and that's what we're doing, right?
But
Yeah.
we're in this mentality, this kind of thinking pattern of like, oh, well, I haven't, since supper, like I'm breaking fast. It's in the morning. I need meal. I need a meal. I need food because my body has been, empty for like so many hours, and that's when your body can focus on like not digesting and doing other things like detox and processing all those things.
Burning your own fat.
Burning your own fat, yeah, because we always have plenty of survival muscle, so it's not like you're gonna it's you're not starving yourself,
Yeah, you're
right?
not going to die. I mean,
Mhm.
our bodies are amazing machines.
Yeah.
We're built to last several days without eating.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just amazing.
Weeks.
all
I
the
mean,
things, yeah.
uh,
Yeah, you've proven that.
yeah. I mean, the longest I've gone is 2 weeks, and a friend of mine, Andrew, he went for 39 days, and it's amazing. And I was checking up on him once in a while. I was like, hey, how you doing? Because he had some survival muscle to lean on, right?
Yeah.
But he, at some point, what happened is exactly what I told him would happen, which is like you're not going to be hungry. You're going to feel great. Your body's metabolizing is burning fat, and you're getting ketones. So like you're going to feel like sharp, sharp mind, focused, and everything. And your body will also tell you when you should stop. So at like day 39, I was like, he basically was like, okay, I think it was enough,
I think it's
and
time.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, I saw on the news recently that Dr. Oz promoted not eating breakfast. So it was nice to kind of get a high-profile doctor or
Yeah.
celebrity to kind of get on board with this whole thing and go against some of the processed foods and cereal companies and all this stuff.
Going through the grain on some of that. I mean, I think we are, as a society, we're kind of revisiting some of those entrenched patterns that we followed, like in terms of eating or considering all other things, because like people experiment, and enough of people are communicating right now, thanks to the internet and everything, that people kind of like, hey, this worked for me. Oh, I did this week, and people are starting. So it's like a global study that's happening in
right.
all different places.
Kind of getting a tribe together too, of
Yeah,
like-minded
yeah.
minds that are where before the internet it would be hard to find somebody in your community or
Yeah.
something. So
I
yeah,
think
agree.
that I think what's great is that there's such a huge variety of feedback from people, and people are like, oh, this worked for me, this didn't work for me, and I'm of a firm belief that there is really no like one set of food that you should eat. Like I like the pyramid, like the food pyramid, right? That was invented, and like, oh, these are the proportions in which you should eat certain things.
Yeah.
I think that there is something to kind of use as a baseline. I personally like meat as sort of like my baseline, and then you can add certain things and tweak things, right? And for someone else, that may not work. And some people are vegetarians or even vegans, and although long term they may have some deficiencies. That's what I've heard in terms of like nutrients.
Yeah, I've heard the same.
That happen. But some people might have just genes and just the genetic makeup that is like they can handle certain things and they can't handle other things. Like you have people that are sensitive to certain things and not sensitive to others, right? So because of this biodiversity, I think that everyone has to sort of find their own path. It's just that for me, it was going through that meat, the carnivore diet, because I was able to eliminate other things and then kind of reintroduce some things and then figure out if I'm allergic to something or if I have some kind of negative reaction to something.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was kind of the same with me too. I did a little different where I started on like spinach salads and I'd have some healthy fats into there.
Mm-hmm.
But over time I just found, okay, I really don't want the tomatoes. And so I just like take those off. And then it's like, I really just want the meat and the eggs. And so I started taking the spinach off and it was just kind of a natural thing for me.
Spinach is an interesting thing because that's what blew my mind when I was listening to this I think it was a YouTube video and someone was, I think, and it was a biochemist and so had some authority behind what the statements that he made, and he was talking about and ex-vegan over like several years, and he basically was talking about like how plants don't want to get eaten just like animals don't want to get eaten.
Right, sure.
It's just that they can't run away.
Yeah.
And what he was saying, which I found super interesting, is like, well, because they can't pick up the roots and just run away, they essentially have to be super good chemists. They have to figure out how to discourage things to eat them. Not to eat them. I mean, like, how do you discourage an animal to not eat your leaves?
Yeah.
Well, you produce some specific chemicals that will somehow affect the animal, right?
It's chemical warfare, right?
Chemical warfare, yeah.
And that's, there's lots of chemicals that we use that actually come from plants that are basically natural insecticides.
Yeah.
So you look at, I think caffeine's one of them, right? So
you told me about caffeine.
Yeah, it really messes up the neurotransmitters of these insects that are trying to eat these leaves, and they figure out, no, I'm not going to eat that thing anymore.
That's right. And it's understandable that plant wants to protect its leaves, because the way I see leaves for plant is like they're solar panels. Like, okay, if I am going to produce a fruit, right, and I'm going to have seeds in it, that's plants investment and energy investment, right? Because it takes a lot of energy for plant to produce a fruit which has seeds, and then the hope of the plant is that some kind of animal is going to eat it and poop out the seeds all over the place. So it's basically
spread their reproductive.
Right. So it's basically a reproductive system, right? So therefore, it wouldn't put anything bad for most. I mean, obviously, the plant can't design something that's good for all animals. So it might be like majority or of them, and they will eat it and spread the seed. So therefore, it wouldn't put any harsh or rough chemicals for most of the animals, right?
That's why, and even make it sweet so it's appealing, right?
Exactly. But like leaves, like you have spinach, right, is something that the plant needs to operate, and that those are its solar panels, and so wants to protect them. So it actually has, so the leaves, what we consider like healthy stuff, which is healthy greens. You have all the
leaves and lettuce,
lettuce, kale, the superfood, right? And it's like the plant doesn't want you to eat that because that's what it needs to sustain itself.
Yeah.
So
that's where it gets its water, its light.
Yeah. I was shocked to that when this biochemist was talking about if excessive amount of spinach is what actually can cause kidney stones.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because there's a chemical in there, and I'm not gonna even try to remember what it is right now. You guys can look it up. It has a chemical that essentially binds to calcium and then gets lodged in your kidneys, and that's so years of watching Popeye, the Sailor Man, cranking out, out a can of spinach and having all that thing. Yeah, that's what we used to think. And now we kind of know that this is not, and again, this may vary per person too, because some people may have
Sure.
a biology
Yeah, I
and
agree.
genetics that will help, dissipate that or flush it out or whatever. Maybe they have an enzyme that kind of deals with it. Who knows? But, science said that this was binding calcium and causing kidney stones. So,
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I think I always turn back to kind of the ancestral diet, right? And you think about fruits and vegetables. We didn't have access to them all year round. Before refrigeration, even, maybe 200 years ago, 150 years ago, before refrigeration, right? We were canning some vegetables, but we still didn't have access to them all the year round. We had access to them seasonally.
right.
So that's kind of one of my bigger arguments, that we should have an animal-based diet and have these other things kind of seasonally. So.
Yeah, that's true, especially with refrigeration. Our ancestors ate a lot of a lot. I don't know what the norms were, but like they were eating fermented foods,
Right.
like the sauerkrauts, the kimchis, that kind of stuff. Yogurts, things that were sort of like processed, by bacteria, by anaerobic processes to ferment stuff, right?
And those bacteria do a lot of things to take out some of the harmful things that are harmful for humans.
Exactly, processing. I mean, when you make yogurt out of milk, it literally just takes the lactic acid, because that's what the bacteria are feasting on, and literally just converting that into other things that are beneficial for you and kind of work with your gut bacteria. So
Okay.
good.
So let's go back to your journey. So you got on the 1 meal a day plan 3-4 years ago, and then what happened? Did you learn more about exercise, more about what exactly? How did you transition from that point?
So I always worked out. Not as super religiously. Now as I'm getting older, I kind of know my limits, and so I try to work out moderately at least 3 times a week. But I'd say that diet is it is true, at least for me, like 80 or 90% of keeping body weight, keeping in shape, having good energy. It all comes from diet. Yeah, strength training, resistance training, all of that stuff is definitely vital for you to strengthen your muscles. And just like Dr. Tim said, you have to have good food, nutritious food that your body can absorb, and then obviously don't be sedentary, don't just sit and all day and,
Sure.
and move. So, but it doesn't take that much. Once you have good food, your body is really well designed to kind of heal itself. You give it the right stuff, and this engine is gonna purr.
Right.
And that's the thing with and the analogy is if you add water to your fuel in your car, to the gas tank, it's gonna be sputtering. It's not gonna work right. And that's kind of like the analogy that I have for eating foods that are processed, refined, and just your body just can't get a lot out of it. And on another podcast that I recently recorded with a awesome guest, who's a naturopath doctor. She was telling me about how the gut, literally this is where some of the allergies come from. Like when your gut is leaking, in a sense of that allows elements through its lining, through its wall, to seep through that wall and get absorbed. And then your immune system is not recognizing it. That's when you have some of those allergic reactions. And so that podcast, if I can plug a podcast on my own show, with Karen Threlkol is going to be airing soon, and she, I want you to definitely watch it, because she is a fountain of knowledge, just like Dr. Tim. She's a fountain of knowledge. I mean, that's her business. I mean, we talked for almost 2 hours, if not over 2 hours, and she was talking about all these different things, and I said, "Oh, Dr. Threlkol, you got to come back, and we got to talk about these in separate podcasts, because there's follow-up, because there's just so much to learn."
The encyclopedia volumes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's see. What was I?
Oh yeah, so you asked me what then?
The transition.
The journey, the transition.
Exercise.
So, eating once a day, having that option, and it's more satisfying too, because when you eat, you have all this calorie almost credit. You can eat more, right?
You can really get satiated.
You can get satiated
and not feel bad about it.
And not feel bad. Yeah, it's not it used to be fist size of protein, fist size of this, fist size of that, and you were portion measuring that. And I went through that too. I mean, I bought these little containers, and I was putting stuff in, and it's A, it's time consuming. B, it's just monotonous every day. It's just not.
I don't think it's sustainable.
I knew it was not sustainable for me. Yeah. So now I'm like, I'm going back on the carnivore diet. I do want to try I do want to try being a vegan for a month, or maybe longer. Who knows? Depending on how I'm going to feel, and vegetarian.
Yeah, you might be surprised to know that I was actually vegetarian, vegan for about 6 months, and at one point in my life, yeah. So
really,
I've kind of come full
all right.
circle.
Let's
as well.
segue to that for a second. So how did so how did that work out? Like, why did you stop?
I think it was because of a documentary I actually saw on Netflix about how bad animals have been treated, and so I said, well, I'm going to try this out for a little bit. I just, I'm pretty open-minded like you, so I tried it out, but I had a lot of proteins, so a lot of lentils and beans, and I still did the eggs, so it wasn't like a total vegetarian based diet, and it worked for me for a few months, but then I kind of started craving meat again, I guess. So I think if you listen to your body, your body will tell you what you need. So.
I agree. It's and a colleague of ours, Lance, he went on a vegetarian diet, and he's super happy with it. He lost ton of weight, and he feels great. He works out and all of that. I think the important thing is do the lab work, see if there's any deficiencies, because that's something that's kind of like long term that can creep up on you. Because if the only thing that you're going to judge your success in kind of like reshaping your body and your your stamina and everything is just by how many pounds you're going to see on a scale, then that's a very one-dimensional way of looking at it, right? You need to see what are the markers, what are and even that is kind of, some of them are sort of like questionable, because there are certain standards,
subjective,
subjective with we talked about cholesterol and how that level over the decades is kind of like lowered down. It used to be 400, right?
Yeah, and I love how Dr. Goodman was like my hero when he said that on your podcast, that doctors should be fired for prescribing statins. They should be sued for malpractice. And I was like, yes, finally somebody's saying it. Like all the research that I've looked at, you look at these centenarians, right? That people that have lived to 100 years old. And some of the research they've done on them, they have the highest levels of cholesterol. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why are we prescribing drugs to people to lower cholesterol when it's linked to longevity?
Yeah, I mean, the way I understand cholesterol, and at least a tiny little sliver of its aspect, is that it's used by your body to patch up and fix up a lot of stuff in your body. Yeah. And I'm going to leave it at that to professionals. But it is like how you feel is one thing. But have do some lab tests to just kind of like have better overview picture of your body. Like, are you deficient in something else? Because you might just come to wrong conclusions based on lack of information. If like you're like, oh, I'm doing all these right things and I still feel crappily. Why? What's happening? Well, if you do blood work, and Dr. Threlkel was talking about that. She was saying, like you might be deficient in certain key things you might not even know, and then that's causing some symptoms, and you're going to be blaming something else because you made a wrong correlation.
Sure. Yeah. We've talked about this before. There's so many environmental factors and so many variables that sometimes it's hard to narrow down to what's the problem.
And Dr. Goodwin was talking about that too. In like all these external stressors, so you have like the physical, the chemical, and the emotional stressors. So like you could literally be making the wrong conclusions because some other things are affecting you, even though you might be eating.
Yeah, actually, Dr. Tro is one of my heroes as well, and his number one thing where he says people have gone off from losing weight and then they kind of go back up. The number one thing he puts on his list is stress. That's what he sees in his practice is stress. People start stress eating. Maybe something's going wrong in their relationship or with their kids or at work or whatever. And then it's like, I need that chocolate. I need that ice cream.
Yeah,
blah, 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 blah.
Comfort food to get you. Yeah, cortisol.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sometimes your friend, sometimes not your friend. And I believe in general that there is a balance to everything. It's if the pendulum swings to one side too far, it's probably not healthy. So anything that you're going to probably do in extreme is not going to be healthy, especially over like extended period of time. So the same thing with like, I mean, heck, even water, like, if you drink too much of water, it's going to dilute your electrolytes in your body, and salts and things, and your system is going to be out of balance. So there's always that golden zone.
Yeah, and I found when I improved my nutrition and got off the processed foods that I actually drink less water now, and I don't know if it's just my body. Listen to your body, and
right. Yeah, definitely listen to your body. It will tell you when things are kind of just make sure you listen. Like
Yeah.
Very, very.
But back to your point about diet being 90%
Yeah.
and exercise at 10%. I don't think that's advertised very well, because it took me a long time to really understand that and to hear it from several different people. I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. I can out exercise, whatever food I eat. And I guess if you're Lance Armstrong, you can.
Yeah.
And Michael Phelps.
And if you get like
else.
a blood transfusion as
Yeah.
as he was getting, right?
Right. Well, you think about Michael Phelps, what he was eating in the Olympics, right?
Right.
Several thousand calories.
Yeah, like 8,000 calories or something. Yeah.
But swimming is such an intense sport, and you're burning so many calories. Most of us aren't doing that, so diet is definitely the key.
Water is conducting 20 times the thermally. It takes like 20 times heat away from your body, 20 times
really?
faster.
Yeah.
So like you're literally, as you're heating the water around you, you're losing energy, and your body's trying to keep up your core temperature, and then so that's why you're burning so many calories.
I hadn't
That's
heard
why.
that before.
In addition to like his obviously awesome athlete,
Actual
moving
his arms,
moving and swimming, and his being an awesome athlete. Just the physics of water dissipating heat and your body trying to keep up is what's burning a lot of calories in swimming.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and you think about your brain. We have what 20% of our energy or more going to our brains. I think it is.
Yeah. It's the single biggest organ that uses up energy. Yeah, it's almost like this is the thing, and the rest is just like a support system.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, let's transition to your podcast. So you've got a new podcast out. You've had several interesting people on. You've lived up to your name, I think. I've watched a couple of them, Kathy Mann and Dr. Goodwin, and they've both been great. And so what kind of motivated you to get started with this?
So first, thank you. This has been a long journey for me. And this is sort of like the message that I do want to kind of send to some of the people out there, which is, I used to feel like I was an introvert. In my 20s, I felt like I was pushing. I wanted always to have control and be in control and all that. But then at some point, like, I don't know, like something got me crushed, and I was just like, it became like more like introverted, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. Like, I mean introverted as in like I drew energy from within versus like from without. And being an extrovert is not only being a public speaker and being all out there and being loud and being a social butterfly. I think it's like when you draw energy from others. And I think now I have a healthy balance. I'm not like a far out on extroversion scale, but I'm like somewhere like a little bit over to that, because I enjoy that energy that I get when I talk to people, and that's what kind of like the shell cracked, and the chrysalis opened up, and this butterfly is coming out, and but I think one of the reasons why I love doing these podcasts, talking to interesting people about interesting topics, is because I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning new things. And I get bored with something doesn't like really engage me or challenge me, that I stay engaged in something, whether it's project at work or if it's project at home or something. If it doesn't challenge me, if it's not, there's just if it becomes just monotonous, I just get bored and I don't want to do it. So I had a tendency of like starting some projects and not finishing them. And my wife will attest to that. And you think like day in court, she'll be like, "Yes, Your Honor, that's true." And so I was looking for.
I've got a list here.
Yeah, like you have like so many hobbies. You're just doing this and that and that, and I'm like, yeah, that is so true. But when I focus on something, there's like 100%. I just focus on it, and I just laser focus. I just drill in super deep. I learn everything that I can, and I enjoy the process. But then when I start a project with that, then unless something motivates me, then I tend to be like, I laugh that, I have the Dory syndrome, like, like kind of like, oh, look, something shiny, ooh, and
squirrel.
Squirrel, and off I go. With doing podcast and doing specifically this type of podcast or YouTube show or whatever you want to call it, it allows me to speak to different people, allows me to learn from subject matter experts. I'm super in. Namaste. I was super lucky to have like awesome guests. I mean, I've recorded over a dozen podcasts by now, and it's just, it gets better and better. Every person that I meet, it's different stories, different experiences. I love learning from somebody else's experience. because that to me that's a shortcut to knowledge
Oh, for sure.
and
Yeah.
wisdom, because it's not only knowledge, it's like wisdom that they gained out of some specific experience. So it just keeps me engaged. So that's kind of like the key. I learn something new. I satisfy a little bit of my extroversion by having that interaction, and then I love sharing their story with somebody else. So that's the value that they offer. They share something I learned, and they also share it through this medium, through this podcast with others, so others can learn from that as well. And I think that just makes you feel good. It just makes you feel good, because like if someone, and I've had I had doctors, I had book authors about stress and suicide, and this week I'm going to have a guest that's going to talk about opioid addiction. Melody, and who lost her son. So like all these different things you learn, just it's like college compressed, because like you're getting these awesome stories and this knowledge, and then sharing with someone else, it's going to change somebody's life. You never know when that story is going to change somebody's life. So it's highly motivational to me to do this. I enjoy it, and I learn new things as I go. And even though this is not my natural sort of like, this is not like, I'm not a journalist. I hadn't had that training other than going to New York Film Academy at some point in my life, sort of like that creative aspect. But that's not me. I'm not an actor. I'm like, this is not like what I used to thrive. But now I feel like I am, because it just feels good.
That's awesome. Yeah, I could echo a lot of those statements that you said about your life, about coming from introvert to extrovert, and about being a lifelong learner. So maybe we'll get into that when you interview me. But yeah, it's like I was listening to my self-talk when you were talking about that. But
yeah, it's and
I just love to learn. I
Yeah.
do the same thing where I get bored with things. Right now, I'm kind of into the skiing and really perfecting my ski technique.
Yeah.
There was a time in my life where I was really into cycling for a couple years, but once I kind of reached, it's obviously not elite athlete type level, but a level that I'm comfortable with. I
Right.
kind of get bored with it, and I'm like, I want to learn the next new
Yeah,
thing. So
yeah. And I really believe that this is universally true for most people. And obviously, I don't want to be generalizing, but for most people, I think everybody loves to grow, to learn something new.
I think it's just human nature.
Yeah. Like look at kids. Kids will try anything at least once. They play, they'll explore, and I think we all still have that in us. It's just that sometimes like once you become an adult, whatever that means, and you got your life and you're doing your work and day in and day out, and if you don't have some kind of outlet or something that you do that allows you to continue to grow, then you just start feeling, it's like work really is work.
You're like dying inside.
Yeah, you're dying inside, and then you're craving doing those things in which allow to grow you.
Yeah, and that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, like creating or getting that creative side out of yourself, right? I said that I've told you this. I think there's two types of people in the world. There's consumers and there's creators, right? And we have both inside of us. But when we get older, it seems like that creative part just kind of dies, and the consumer takes over. And then you've got a few people that realize that, and they come out like what is it, Kathy Mann? She decided she loved to write, and she finally went back to her writing, and is now really enjoying her life. So
yeah, it's I think that. Just kind of pull back, the grand scheme of things. I think we really are living in a extraordinary time, because
it's amazing.
With the onset of communications and availability, like who knows who's going to be listening to this podcast and when it might change their life.
Yeah, who
right?
knows? Yeah,
who knows, right? So but you have the ability to put that out there, right? And then with the onset of automation, more and more automation. And some people see it as a threat. Some people, see it as a thing that's going to liberate more people, because, I believe that whatever we can automate, we should. And this whole 40-hour a week, work week thing is might be working for some people. For some people, it doesn't, because like if you don't have that creative outlet where you can take that, then you're going to look at your work as something that's impeding you to getting into that creative part, right? And then you feel like, oh, you're dying, and people hate. Like that's one of the things that you constantly hear. It's like, oh, I hate my job. It's like, I'm just dying, and so I believe that with automation, those jobs that can be automated, But it's going to take a whole society shift to recognize that and say like, hey, maybe people should work less. Maybe they should work 30 hours. Because
Right.
it's not only about keeping you busy. It's not only keeping like that you don't stay home and do something silly. Yeah, that will be the time that will allow you to explore those things. If you want to get into painting, like why didn't you get into painting ever? Well, because I don't have time. Well, now you would have more time and you can explore. And I bet you, this is just my feeling, that there will be fewer people with anxieties, with stress, with there's people with just
Suicide, that type of
suicide,
thing.
all
So,
of
yeah,
that. Yeah, it's that I think we and I think we universally all share that. We share that when we get into like creative things and we explore things and we learn things and we grow through that. I feel that that's what keeps us calm and unstressed and like just sane.
Yeah, I agree. So let's take that point and transition from the creative to, I know one of your interests is VR, and especially VR education.
Yeah.
So where can we use that creativeness in a VR education type setting?
Oh my goodness, you're gonna be a great co-host, man.
Loaded question, or
no,
you like it?
all good questions. And we've talked about education, and we've talked about VR, and primarily what I see right now is like VR, people treat it like this is a gaming thing, right? Like you just kind of have this awesome next generation gaming.
Let's pause a second. So for those who haven't heard the term VR, we're talking about virtual reality. And typically that involves putting some kind of headset on where you have a whole 6 degrees of freedom. You look up and you see something different than looking left and right.
Yeah,
so.
Computer generated world inside of inside of this headset. So wherever you move, it feels like you're in a real space, and it gets better and better and better. And primarily businesses and VR, companies that create virtual reality headsets and games. That's the impetus, right? It's the gaming. It's like
gaming
it's the next, like you want to be like Ready Player One type of thing, in immersive environment. They can feel, touch, haptics, which is like like sense of touch in this through like various gadgets that are available now and then maybe and definitely in the future. But it's all towards gaming, right? So which is I love gaming. I'm not a gaming in a sense of that I don't spend too much time in it, but I believe in gaming as a method of training.
Sure.
So training through gaming is a huge thing. That's my jam. I love it because look at kids. That's what kids do. Kids play games, and I'm not just talking about like computer games, but they play games
They
constantly.
make up their own games.
They make up
right?
their own games, right? And they learn through that. So gaming is a natural way, another natural way,
Another human
natural way, the way we learn. So I really got into exploring how gaming can be employed in education, and there's this whole state of flow when you're
Sure,
playing a game, right? You're doing something that's challenging but not too difficult. It's that sweet spot where you're progressing, but it's not boring because like, oh, I can just win this anytime I want. And that kind of feeling, that sensation is that sense of flow, which was described by many in this industry and in psychology as well. And this is what gets you and keeps you engaged, and you love it. Like you say, like I'm in the zone, right? I love it. I feel it.
And you're constantly learning.
Yeah,
I think
you're
that's
learning.
the thing about games is they give you that feedback. Okay, you got this score, or you got to this level. And you're like, yeah, I can get to this one, this one, this one. So you get that constant reinforcement.
And so I think we should gamify more of education. And there was definitely, this is not a new concept. I'm not inventing something new over here, but I totally subscribe with it. Because I feel that through gaming we can engage students, kids, adults, anybody, and keep them in there, keep them growing. I'm super big into, like, my mission is like, even mission for this podcast is listen, learn, and share. So it's this growth pathway, right? Like
Sure.
I want to grow. And then as you grow, you want to share it too, so others can kind of benefit from that. But going back to virtual reality, I think virtual reality is a sort of like unique space, no pun intended, in which
It is really unique.
in which you can create almost anything. So now suddenly things that were either impossible or very difficult to do or very expensive to do in terms of teaching someone, you can just virtually create that. So like if you want to create a chem lab or some kind of physics lab, like you can literally create these worlds in which kids can learn like through like almost first-hand experience. They can touch things, they can experience things, they can modify things and learn rapidly from their failure. And here's another topic that I love, which is rapid learning through rapid failure. Like you want to fail as quickly as possible, right? So you learn like, oh, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do that, I shouldn't do that. This is what works.
And that's something that, in our education system, it seems like failure's bad, right?
Yeah.
But that's another human nature thing. That's how we learn.
That's
how we progress. Yeah. And so if we can make failure, we want to fail.
Part of the process.
We
right.
want to fail.
Right. Like you don't want to like build a plane and learn at the end that it's you put everything backwards, right? You want to test and you want to fail quickly, so you learn from that, you modify, and you progress. And so gaming environments and VR, allow you to create those spaces where that can be achieved. And
they're using them in the airline industry, right? So you can practice flying. Without crashing your plane.
Absolutely, simulators.
I know the Air Force is using them.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the Army even on some battlefield type.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So. Army has a gaming, like literally will take you through the whole boot camp, and you will learn how to throw grenades and do this and that, and so it's like it's really a simulator. Yeah, it's been used all over the place. But in terms of like our education. And here's another plug that I'm going to put in. I'm going to have on the show a guest. She was from New Hampshire, and she was a New Hampshire Teacher of the Year award winner.
Oh, cool.
And she is, and she when we communicated, she said that she's really big into like gamifying education, and that's what she does with kids right now.
Right up your alley.
And it's like, so I'm so excited because I think it's this movement has been going on for some time right now when we are trying to do different things to kind of gamify, make education more interesting, is happening more and more, and it's more accessible right now, especially with like computers and virtual reality, when suddenly like something that would be expensive is not going to be as expensive, and it's worth investment. But the other aspect that I wanted to touch on with education is, and this is going to take some time because it's going to take societal shift in terms of how we think about education in general, because we have this very structured ladder, like step-like movement of like. It
seems like we're decades behind where we should be with the technology and just in general.
Yeah, and just the approach of education, like, oh, you're in this class for 10 months in a year, and then you're progressing to the next class and next grade and next grade and next grade, right? So like your first grade, second grade, and you're expected to kind of cope with everybody else. You're expected to progress with everybody else, and I believe it's a disservice to both those who excel and for those who need a little bit more time. And and let me just qualify that as well, because I don't mean that someone who's taking a little bit more time in learning something is. We have that negative connotation with that. Like, what are you slow?
Like
what are you like? Why are you falling behind? Yeah. And it's amazing. Like, there's numerous examples of like how someone who took a little bit more time to really understand something, a topic, right? Then later on just surpassed everybody else that was initially, and it's because they owned it. They owned it. They fully understood it. They grokked it. They fully got it, right?
They weren't just practicing the test answers, right? Yeah.
And so two things that I believe is that in terms of that, is we should have asynchronous education model, which is kids should not be like, oh, you're a 7-year-old, you're going to the first grade, you're this, and then you're expected to go at this kind of like pace. I believe that it should be asynchronous. You should excel and go as fast as you can cope with what you're learning. And then if you need more time, you will get up there as well, and it's up to you. And you don't do these, no kids left behind type of ideas, which is like, oh, we're going to just lower every the test standards so that everybody passes, so they can cope with this mechanism of pushing people from grade to grade. So I think it should be totally asynchronous. It should be mixed. It's okay. Like, psychologically and behaviorally, I don't know. We need to talk to like a psychologist to see how that would work when you would have kids of various ages in one class, and how big of a difference age gap you could have without any other unforeseen maybe issues. But in terms of just education and knowledge, I think that just having kids being able to kind of progress at their own pace would get people educated better and maybe even probably faster because a lot of what happens when you're learning some things and you don't have enough time to really understand it, then you hate it. Why most people hate, like, oh, I hate math, I hate calc, I hate this, I hate that, because like they didn't have the time to really get it and
They
to
had
really
to get through a certain
they had to, like,
curriculum.
I'm just going to learn how to pass how to take this test and score enough so I can move on.
And it's not the teacher's fault either. They have a curriculum they have to follow, right?
Yeah.
So they
yeah,
we have to get through this section in 1 week, and then we're moving on to the next.
Yeah. Let me be clear about that as well. I mean, it's definitely not teachers' fault. They're just trying to cope with it. And then if you have a kid that got in 80% or 90%. I mean, I love that. I read it somewhere. I wish I could give credit to someone who said this, where I read that you want everyone to pass with A's, with 100%, because like, do you want a pilot that can fly 90% of the time and it's a passing grade, or 80% of the time?
Yeah, there's that commercial, right? That good enough. They go to a tax advisor. Yeah, you're good, but I think we'll do this. But do you want someone good, or do you want someone really good? Yeah.
It's the same concept with learning something. Like if you learn whatever you need to learn in math, and you get, let's say, passing grade, you get 80, or even lower, right? Then that means that you missed 20%.
Right.
And then in the next grade, when the following concepts that pivot and hinge on the 100% of what you were supposed to learn in a previous grade, and you don't have that 20% because you never understood it, you never got it. Now that compounds, and now you're like, I don't understand why this is so. Well, yeah, because you didn't understand the 20% that were needed to understand this, and this just compounds over time, and then you're pushing on to another grade, and then more complex things, come your way, and then suddenly, like, you just can't get calc, and you're like, I'm frustrated. I don't understand, like, why I didn't understand.
I didn't get this concept in algebra, so why don't I understand this part?
Yeah. I think the analogy that I've heard somewhere was the analogy was like building a house. So you're building a house, and the foundation, it's passing. The foundation is 80% okay, and then you're building everything on top of it.
That's not good.
Right, or even worse, it's like distributed, so it has all these weak spots all over the place, right? So then you're like, oh yeah, but see, it's passing. Don't worry about your foundation. It passed a grade, and then you're building the structure on top of it, and then it collapses because the foundation wasn't there.
Yeah, good. Well, what else should we talk about? So we did VR, we did your health journey, we did kind of 1 meal a day, we did carnivore diet. Mm-hmm. What are some other interests that are in your queue here?
Well,
what do you see next? What's your next step?
Where I want to take this podcast, I want to develop apodcast.com as a platform where not only me as a host, but other hosts can come in and continue this journey, and maybe even in a distributed fashion, in a sense, where we get interesting people that we can talk to. I mean, I kind of branded, like, in my head, this is like, I'd love to build like an empire like Joe Rogan with his podcast, which Joe, love you, man. What you're doing is inspiring, and inspired gazillions of people on so many different levels. So thank you for being and doing that. Followed you since you were on news radio show, and so I want to take what Joe is doing in terms of like having these interested, long-form conversations with people. Obviously, he's a celebrity, and celebrities that visit that are his guests are like high caliber. But what I believe in is that there's millions of interesting people out there, and some of them we will never ever know, and we will never get to learn from them. And I'm on a mission of finding those gems, finding those diamonds in the rough. Some of them don't even maybe pursue, like, they do what they do. They're great. They have some.
They don't want the limelight.
They don't want the limelight, right? But I want to find those interesting people. I want to learn from them, and I want to share that. And that's kind of like the premise of the podcast. So that's kind of like the phase one, the way I see it. So build the audience so they know that when they come to a podcast, they will find a variety of interesting topics with interesting people with fresh and new or just different perspectives, because that's another thing that I've learned about myself. Like, the more perspectives you gain on something, the better equipped you're going to be to handle that, the overall problem. It's like that old adage about the elephant and five people with a blind man
Oh yeah.
You know, touching different part of the elephant. It's like, oh, the elephant must be this flexible thing because they were touching the trunk, and the other one was touching the leg, and so on. It's the same kind of concept. Like, you know, you want to have many perspectives to kind of shape your opinions and your views on things.
The
and
holistic view,
yeah.
kind of back to the nutrition part. Like, it's not just nutrition; it's exercise, it's environmental factors.
Yeah, and we talked about that as well with outside of this podcast, which is, we have these tendencies, and this really pains me. We have these tendencies of sports-like attitudes towards a lot of things, whether it's politics or sports or even opinions on things. It's my camp or your camp.
Right.
It's my team or your team. It's Democrats or Republicans. Like, there's no like middle. Like, people and if anything, it seems like everything is kind of like drawing to the sides instead of like trying to figure like, hey, we both have some good ideas. Let's see if we can mesh them together and see if there's something that's better when we congeal, you know, both camps or you know, work together. And I know it might sound cliche, but it really is true, because a lot of the things, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And yes, some things are facts, and like, yes, you know, this is, you know, just fact, period. But a lot of ideas, when they come together, I think is where the magic happens, where people find like, oh, that changed my opinion. I'll give you an example. I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast when he talked to Andrew Yang. And Andrew Yang was, you know, a presidential, for those who are watching this in 2050 or something, we might be in a museum. We'll be like holograms right now. For those of you who are watching this, you know, this is 2020 right now, elections, candidates, and on Joe Rogan's podcast, he had Andrew Yang as one of his guests. And Andrew was talking about universal income. And I was like a staunch. I was like, what?
This
what are you
stupid,
talking about?
yeah.
This is stupid. Are you kidding me? Why, you're gonna just give people money for free? I mean, that's just gonna collapse of society. Like, just
Nobody's gonna do anything. No, people need jobs. People need work. We need to create these things so people can be busy. Like, it just makes no sense. And so he was talking about it, like, and he, very logical progression. He kind of illustrated this is A, doable, B, it's actually beneficial for many different reasons. But you have to, and I don't want to go into that. Just watch Joe Rogan's podcast with Andrew Yang. But it changed my perspective. I was like, wow, and he's, you know, he's a very well-educated guy, but also, you know, super smart. How he can visualize this idea, like, hey, we're going to spend $1 trillion on paying this out to all the citizens, but we're going to save, you know, easily $1 trillion here because we're not going to have to, you know, like incarceration rates and all of these different things that we, you know, social costs that we have. And so, like, I'm like, wow, like, that really just blew my mind. And I was like, I would not consider that ever. If someone just like in a conversation would tell me that, oh yeah, we should do that because universal income, and we should just pay people. I was like, come on, you know, poppycock. Until you dive into the details,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes, you know, you were doing your 5-day fast. I think that's what really inspired me. Is like, what, you did 5 days?
Yeah.
Like, didn't you die? Like,
right, yeah.
Like, that really opened my mind to really research this intermittent fasting thing. And
it's the directness of experience, right? Is what you get, and that's why some of the guests that I have on the show is like I get firsthand experience based on like their experience. So like a second.
Yeah, it's like a personal mentor almost.
Yeah, it's like So there are a lot of people like that, and so I think like building this would open people's minds, would open people to new ideas, would change people's perspectives, or at least add a perspective so they can form their ideas better. And that's because we could connect with these interesting people with interesting experience, with extraordinary experiences that we can learn from. So my mission is to continue on this, to find interesting people and bring them on the show, whether in studio over here or remotely when we record with people. I mean, I talk to people from South Africa and Syria and UK, and I have people that are scheduled from all over the place. And because they are everywhere, interesting and smart, and you know, people with extraordinary experiences are everywhere, and we can learn from them. So my aspiration is to do something like Joe Rogan is doing, which is he brings these interesting people and has just an open conversation the way we have it right now, long form, so the person, your guest, has enough time to talk about what they want to talk about, instead of these snippets of, oh, you know, here's global warming problem, or here's like this problem, how are you going to fix it? 15 seconds.
Yeah, what's on the news, basically.
Yeah, what's on the news, like these sound bites that
these
people
things
are
out of context,
right,
and you can't really explore
right. And
them
it seems
very
like society is just thriving on this negative aspect of it, like putting someone in a spot, like how do you crush someone? How do you like like in an argument? And people, it's almost like gladiators, like it's like a spectacle. And I think it's it might be fun for a little while if you're into that, but like if you look at it long term, it's just killing our society. And I think we need more of these opportunities, these platforms. And that's why I think podcasting is exploding. A lot of people are doing podcasts, and everybody's going to find their own niche, or maybe not even niche, but like audience. Because I don't really have a niche per se, unless
when you first told me about this podcast,
Yeah.
I was like, well, what are you going to focus on?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to focus on interesting people. Like, are you going to have an audience? Like, you need someone to focus on.
Right.
But I've loved the variety that you've had on the
Yeah.
show, and I think it's great.
It's so
I
eye-opening.
think it's going to work.
It's so eye-opening because then you go on a website and then you can filter on whatever you want. You want body, mind, spirit, tech, whatever topic category you want to focus on, and then find these interesting people that we'd probably never ever hear about, and get their perspective, get their knowledge, wisdom, and experience, and learn from that, and share it with someone else. So maybe it may change somebody else's life. So that's kind of like stage one for me, to do the podcast and bring more.
Just share this knowledge, like a big
share
collective
that knowledge
into one space.
Yeah.
Cool.
And in fact, I would love to, like we talked about it, like using like the brain of just like node, graphing like what's connected with
map,
what.
yeah.
Like a mind map. Yeah. Phase two, what I see for this, which is going to kind of naturally grow out of this idea of just talking in this open, long format with interesting guests and subject matter experts, is to maybe create some online training. And this is where this intersects with my love for like bringing and helping changing education. Nowadays we have still like these structured institutions. We have colleges, and you progress through something. But I believe that in the future, especially with VR, just kind of tying loose ends over here, is we're going to have this asynchronous system when an employer who wants someone who's talented and experienced in something is not going to be looking at, oh, you got a 4-year degree in this, or you have a 2-year degree in this, or you have this acronym next to your name, or that, or so on. It's going to be like, show me what you can do. And it's already happening in a tech industry where like programmers, in the past it used to be like, oh, you had to have computer science degree, 4-year degree, hopefully master's, and if you had a PhD, that's awesome. You're going to get that much more money, right? Because you invested that extra amount of time.
And even specialists, right? Are you specialists in C++, Python, Java?
Right. Certifications, right? And that's why they're like, well, let me have you sit down and code something and show me what you can do. Here's a problem. In fact, a friend of mine, Gene Sheck, he had he started a company, 24 Proof, in which like customers could come in with like, here's a project, I need a whatever widget, right? Sure. And then he had literally like a hackathon where within 24 hours, people from all over the place were logging into the system, and they were basically creating an MVP, a minimally viable product concept,
like a prototype,
like proof of concept that this actually works. And then you can see that person's work on a creative side, on a coding side, and literally this is the proof. And that's why,
put your money where your mouth is, right? Yeah.
And I believe that's how, like, and it's already happening in tech companies in Silicon Valley. And more and more tech companies are like, oh, I don't care if you have a high school diploma or college diploma, show me what you can do. Yeah. So nowadays in IT and technology and programming and software development, it matters almost more if you can show, like, I created this project.
It's right?
Yeah. And you can check it out, and it's something real. That kind of vets me as a subject matter expert. So now, taking from that paradigm to education in general, I believe that the same is going to happen in the future. And VR is just going to be one of the access methods. So I foresee my daughter, who's like 4.5, soon to be 5, in her future, she's going to have like next gen VR headset in which she's going to be able to connect with mentors and teachers from all over the planet to teach her, specifically what she needs at her level, at her time, in her time, and it's going to be this asynchronous learning experience
In real time, you're talking about?
Well, so I think it's going to be multi-phase. I think because computer based training is getting better and better. So I think that the way you utilize teachers and mentors of the future is that you don't use them as PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint presenters. On this slide you see this, and on this slide you see this. Because I think that's a waste of their time. I think we can do a fusion of different technologies. You're going to have, and it's happening already, and that's going to be another guest that I'm going to plug in over here, my good friend DJ Hovermail, who's working in cyber, and he's doing a lot of cyber, and he's training National Guard and Army, and a lot of reverse education is happening the way that you have someone watch set of videos, do some computer-based training, and then at the end they have one-on-one time with a mentor, with a teacher. So they already went through the stuff that the teacher would normally just kind of by exposition just teach them in the class by so that kids and students can memorize by rote and regurgitate on a test. Instead of that, they're going to watch set of videos, watch some do some computer-based training, so some interactivity, and that's going to take like 80-90% of the workload of the teacher, and they can do it at their own time. They can do it in class. I mean, however you want to do it, but then they just come in with like, I still don't get it. I have this 10% that I just don't get, or 20% or 30%, whatever it is, and that's where valuable time from the teacher comes in, I believe, because then they can spend one-on-one, or maybe one and couple of students that have the same exact problem that they deal with, and then they can kind of drill through that and drive it all the way so they can get it. So now they do have that 100%
personal tutor type stuff.
Yeah, personal tutor, and that engagement, and then teachers love that because now they're like, they don't have this monotonous me PowerPoint
the same thing
every year, right? And they get engagement. They see progression in that student, right? They get happy with like the successes that person, student, kid is getting to, because now the frustration level is kind of taken out a lot, and they can dedicate that time. And it's not like this kind of like, oh, you just read this paragraph and you figure it out.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of like the next phase for me. I want to build this platform. I want to build the audience. So bring in a lot of interesting people, network with a lot of people, and then with some of them, do basically online training and see where that goes. It might be just kind of like some of the training the way it's done right now, which is going to be like, videos and, quizzes and some one-on-one. But I also foresee in the future that VR may be, folded into this and do those like interactive things.
Do kind of a workshop
where you
no
can
matter
do a
where
workshop.
you're at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We just create this virtual space in which we basically just bring in all these people from all over the world. It's almost kind of like you look at Amazon rating system or any other rating system, like how great is this tutor or this teacher, right? And I would totally want to hire for my daughter someone who to mentor her, to tutor her from like whatever country in the world. You're not stuck into this. It's like, okay, I have a school over here because I'm physically here. No, I want to have someone who's like the best in something that my kid needs right now, and I don't care if they're like in whatever country on the planet.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that's already a thing right now. My wife was even looking at doing this, that a lot of part-time moms, they teach English to maybe Chinese or some of these other countries, and they just have a webcam in their computer. Just think of where the technology is going to be in 10 years. Where maybe we can do that in VR.
Totally agree with you. It's happening. We're not going to be able to stop it. I'll tell you why. I mean, yes, it may take longer time because, the education now that, institutions is just like so structured and it's been for hundreds of years. And that's kind of like how we taught. But just like everything else that changes in our age right now, that too is going to have to kind of go through the, evolutionary progress as well. And it's going to change because the market will demand better. And the market is going to deliver better.
It's almost like capitalism for education, right?
Yeah. Like, why should I have an underpaid teacher that's unhappy because they're underpaid, because they're in a specific circumstance or area or geographic location, where I can hire someone anywhere on the planet, and the best one that's the best fit for my kid or kids.
Yeah, I love it. I know you've got a heart out, so
Mhm.
anything you want to end on? We've talked about health, we've talked about VR, we've talked about education.
Mhm.
Any last words of advice or wisdom to your
Yes,
listeners?
I wish, and we're gonna, and of course we're gonna be back, and you're gonna be a guest on the show. I'm gonna talk about your journey, and I have a hard stop, and I'd love to do a little bit more, but I have to go and pick up my kid right now. But yes, my message is, if you are listening to this and you definitely know interesting people, please connect with me, apodcast.com. Visit us. Visit us on a Facebook page, on our Twitter, all those social media things that who know if they exist when you're watching this. But no, connect with us, introduce us to interesting people, and would love to talk to you. Would love to spin this up and bring in more interesting people, share interesting stories, interesting experiences, interesting knowledge, and share that with everybody else. And I will see you on the next podcast where you're going to be guessing. We're going to be talking about your journey.
Look forward to it. Yeah, we'll continue this there. So,
Yeah,
like you said, you got any interesting people, shoot them a note. We'll get them on the show.
perfect. All right, take us out. Roll the outro.